what's up? I am John Bonjour. I'm an artist and a film enthusiast, and welcome to my Halloween Retrospective series, Part 1. Today we're going to be covering Halloween 1 and 2, John Carpenter's absolute seminal classics. Is that the word? Is it seminal? That doesn't sound right anymore. Seminal. Just Googled it, definitely the word. Seminal classics, Halloween 1 and 2. The series is going to look a little bit different than my other videos. I'm going to talk a little more about my experience with these movies and then just sort of run down a list of categories to talk about them. Without further ado, let's jump right into Halloween 1978. So my experience with this movie has been a little bit weird. I first saw it because I'd heard so many good things just for years, and I was starting to get into horror, so I was like, hey, it's almost Halloween time, I might as well give this a shot. This was several years ago, and when I saw this movie for the first time, I fully didn't get it at all. I had no taste. I think my original review on Letterboxd, which if you're not following me on Letterboxd, you should be, or don't, because it's this, but in writing. My original review was inarguably a classic. Halloween is quite entertaining, although in my opinion, not the best slasher of the genre. I'm so sorry. This is a great example, I think, of the beauty of human beings' ability to grow and develop taste as they get older. I was so stupid, okay? Looking back on that, I feel like an absolute idiot. But this is a thing for me, with especially John Carpenter's movies. For some reason, I see them the first time and I go, yeah, I guess I could see why someone would like that. And then sometimes the next time, but sometimes 3 or 4 times after that, I'll watch the movie and I'll go, oh, now I get it. I don't know why. I get, everybody's got their faults. But I distinctly remember watching this the first time and going, I feel like I missed something. Like, I don't understand why people rave about this movie. In fact, I remember thinking, I'll probably never watch this again just because it didn't really cut it for me. And then about 2 weeks later, I had this gnawing feeling that, man, I gotta watch Halloween again. So I watched it again. And I went, yeah, it's about the same. Still don't get it. So then I was like, okay, I'm definitely done. And then like a week later, I'm not joking about this timeline, within the span of October, I think I watched this movie 4 times, just because I kept feeling like I didn't quite get it. And then I watched it on Halloween, the night of Halloween, and suddenly it all clicked. Everything worked about the movie that I just didn't really like. I still can't explain what happened exactly. I just remember being like, this is what joy feels like. This is what it's like to be normal and cool. I haven't felt it since, or before that. Pretty lucid moment for me. Anyway, since then, it's been on an annual rewatch, sometimes a couple of times a year. And it's just one of my favorite movies of all time, without question. Our first category of discussion is my favorite kills. Obviously, these are slasher movies, so I guess if you don't want to hear me talk about the kills in these, why are you watching this video? Like, don't get me wrong, I appreciate it. I love you. Boy, why are you here? Not a question for me. Bob's death in this movie is top 10 kills of all time in a movie. Bob is the guy who gets stabbed, obviously, and then stuck kind of into the wall while he's grabbing a drink. There's not a bad kill in this movie, but this stands out uniquely as the best one to me, exclusively for the way that Michael just stands there and looks at him after he's killed him. That little head tilt, I don't know if that was Nick Castle or John Carpenter or somebody else who came up with that. Genius. Give them a raise retroactively. Like, they deserve it. It's incredible. It sets the tone for the way that Michael moves, the way he interacts with the world for the rest of the series. Some of them miss the mark a little bit on that, but we'll get to those later. It also doesn't hurt that this kill is followed by one of the other greatest kills in the movie, and that's Linda. This is where Michael Myers dresses up like a ghost, has the little glasses on, it's adorable. That scene has always felt weird to me, but in the way that I really appreciate. Like, I don't know, and this is true kind of across the board for Myers, especially in these first 2 movies. I don't know what's going on in his mind. Other slasher villains, you think about it, like Jason has a pretty one-track mind. It's kill, 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 mom, mom, mom. Occasionally, I guess he hates sex. Michael Myers might be the only one that really doesn't have a motive until you get into some of the later sequels. Again, they really mess with the lore on this one. Is he a brilliant murder mastermind going around and setting up traps? Or is he just sort of walking around like a machine ready to kill? Dr. Loomis has his whole, the evil is gone from here thing. And at first you kind of feel like he doesn't understand, like he's just a crazy guy. Then you realize like, no, he might be right. Michael Myers might just be pure evil. He might be the embodiment of evil. Even now, there's so many people trying to theorize about what powers Michael Myers, and all of that comes from a couple of moments where he tilts his head and the way he walks, which is crazy to me. This segues pretty naturally into my most notable positives. For me, the shape is obviously the #1 best thing about this movie, but he's served by the other characters around him, the way that the film is shot, which is slow and methodical and dreamlike, and then the music. Those three things kind of blend together to create this exciting, slow build horror movie that I think stands up absolutely to this day. I feel like there's this notion going around that the original Halloween really isn't scary anymore. And in a sense, I kind of agree. The actual scares in this movie are not particularly frightening. Excluding the one in the car where he comes up from the back seat, that gets me every time. Every time I have a tiny little heart attack when that happens. In fact, sometimes when it's dark and I get in my car, I just have to do a little like, Michael, you back there? But aside from that, the moments that are intended to be the big scares of the movie really aren't that scary. Just by the nature of time and how things work, those scares have been dulled by all these other way more terrifying visuals and sounds. But I take umbrage with the idea that Halloween isn't scary anymore. This is a movie that's at its scariest when you truly commit to being in it, to fully embracing the atmosphere and the tone, and then all of a sudden the credits hit and you realize that kind of feeling hasn't gone away. That's what makes this movie scary, is it feels like a regular night. Myers doesn't do any Freddy Krueger pulling people through ceilings and becoming some giant weird TV man. And he doesn't teleport around the forest just because that's where they need him to be in the plot. Next up, we have notable negatives, and we've got, there's, but there's the, final thoughts on Halloween 1978. This is a classic for a reason, right? Like, this isn't a hot take to say that this movie is good. I think if you say this movie is bad, that's a hot take, and it's wrong. I'm sorry, Past John, you're wrong, and you're stupid. This is a movie that feels more than the sum of its parts. But the sum of its parts is not bad at all. Take the music alone. Incredible score, the best score of any horror movie, don't fight me on this. Even down to the way the characters are written. Laurie Strode is someone you can root for, but she doesn't feel mythological. She feels like a human being that's just been thrust into this situation. This is also a movie that's been picked apart to death, but somehow in a good way. The appreciation for this franchise is not unfounded. And honestly, that's why I'm making these videos. I like talking about these movies. All of them, even the bad ones. But none of the franchise would have existed without John Carpenter trying to make this sleepy, spooky, upsetting slasher movie. That leads us into Halloween 2 from 1981, directed by Rick Rosenthal. For so many years, I thought that this was also directed by John Carpenter. He is, however, a producer on this movie, and that definitely shows. I saw this 2 years ago during the pandemic. I waited for so long because I had heard some kind of mixed to negative things about this movie, which is insane to me. When I saw this movie, for just a fleeting second, I thought I liked it more than the first one. Again, I can't stress this enough. Everybody has to grow. Then I saw it again and it sunk way lower. And then throughout the last couple of years, I've been building up, watching it more and more. And honestly, I put it equal to the first one, not in terms of quality necessarily, but just in terms of my personal appreciation for the film. Halloween 2 is a lot meaner than the first one. If the original is this slow build that culminates in this giant explosion, the second is the aftermath. It's way more confused, it's way more frantic, and I think it's probably a better slasher movie than Halloween is. A perfect example of that is my personal favorite kill, the hot tub kill. You have a doctor and a nurse, and they're both kind of young teens, and they end up down in this kind of weird basement thing where there's, I think it's a hydrotherapy hot tub. I don't know what it's for. The point is, they're gonna, do the two. And so they're getting in the hot tub, and it's warm, and then it gets too warm, and you see Michael kind of raise the temperature, and the guy gets out. We stay with the nurse as she's just in the hot tub. She gets out because it's getting too hot, and he goes to check it. In the background, we see him getting murdered. It's shot super well in a way that you see everything that's happening, but it's behind this kind of glazed glass. Brilliant kill. But my favorite kill is when Michael comes in and he puts his hand on her shoulder and she starts licking his hands, which is so gross because they're just, how do you not notice that it tastes like blood and dirt and just years of prison? Anyway, Michael takes her and he drowns her in this boiling water. There's a really gross kind of practical effect of her face getting peeled off. It's a disgusting kill, but I think this is a good example of what I mean when I say this is a better slasher movie than the original Halloween. This movie is harsh. The first one, the kills are pretty tame. They're not super gory. It's just a lot of stabbings, and it's usually shot from pretty far away, not a ton of blood. It's all kept pretty tame. Honestly, like a teen could watch the first movie and I wouldn't be too worried about it. Maybe psychologically, but in terms of the gore. What we have come to expect from a slasher movie is really started by Halloween 2, not Halloween. This thing is so tight. It's like 92 minutes and there is not a boring minute in the bunch. I had a very hard time picking a favorite kill for this because there's some really great ones, especially like when Michael's chasing Laurie, the nurse steps out and he stabs her and lifts her up in the hallway. That image is, no pun intended, burned into my brain. I also want to give a special shout out to Ben Tramer's death because it makes me laugh. He's the kid who gets hit by I think it's the ambulance? No, he gets hit into an ambulance. Anyway, he's stuck between two cars and he just like bursts into flames. A, it's a really good foreshadowing for the eventual end of the movie, but B, I really just appreciate that scene because that encompasses the chaos of this movie perfectly in a way that you're like uncomfortable with it, but also it's entertaining to watch. I also just appreciate, and this is a thing that kind of runs through the later sequels, some of them, I appreciate that it's Ben Tramer. Like, it's not some random guy that we've never heard of. It could have been anybody, right? But I like that it's the guy that we never saw from the first movie, but we know that Laurie had a crush on. There's a lot of just good through lines. The beginning of this movie kind of blends over with the end of the last movie, and then it really feels like it was shot at the same time. This doesn't feel like a sequel so much as just a continuation of the story. It's little things like that that make that work. Having Ben Tramer get absolutely bodied by a car. Having Annie's dad show up and we see the aftermath of that kill. All these things kind of lend into that feeling that this is one night. This isn't a sequel that they went back and retroactively changed a bunch of stuff. This is all one night and it feels like one story. In fact, when I'm watching Halloween 1, it doesn't totally feel complete until I watch Halloween 2. I also think it's really impressive that Dick Warlock is now taking up the mantle of The Shape, Michael Myers, and you don't notice. I mean, he's got like a slightly different body type, so there is that. He takes notes from the way that Nick Castle played him and blends that into the new speed and aggression, which Michael really needs for these kinds of kills. Thus leading me into my standout positives of this movie. I appreciate that it's harsher. I appreciate that it's gorier. I love that it feels like the end of that night. All of that works really well. I like the use of Mr. Sandman, but then especially like toward the end. The end is where this movie shines for me. I think everything in the hospital is good, but the finale of this movie doesn't feel triumphant. The whole point of this movie is that this was a traumatic experience and the town has to reconcile with the deaths of their loved ones. So as much joy as it might take in all the killing, there's a lot more going on outside of that. I feel like all of the Friday the 13th movies, as much as I love those movies, there's nothing going on character-wise, right? You go to watch a guy kill a bunch of people with a machete. That's what you're there for. That's what you get. But Halloween 2 really sucker punches you with this feeling of dread. And it also has some really funny moments, just like the first one. I love the scene where the neighbor comes out and he's talking to Loomis and he's like, "We've been trick-or-treated to death." And Loomis just goes absolutely apeshit and he's like, "You don't know what death is." Donald Pleasance, man, there has never been anyone like him, and there will never be anyone like him. He was a gem. One final positive, there's this long-running tracking shot of Michael walking through this town as you hear the news blaring over the radio. This is easily my favorite scene in this movie. It's not even close. Not a lot happens, like he doesn't kill anybody, he's not doing anything particularly insane. It's that feeling of knowing what he's capable of and seeing him just walk past people, knowing that he could turn and just murder them if he wanted to. It's another one of those things where you're like, I don't know what's going on in his mind and I want to know really bad, but also I never ever want to find out. That scene is incredible, and honestly, this movie is incredible. But there are a couple of things that I think don't totally work, and that brings us to our notable negatives. Specifically, the music has been downgraded pretty dramatically. If the original score is like #1 horror movie score, this fits with like the Annabelle scores for me. The only things that really work about this score are the things that were taken from the original. And then it's got this weird like 80s kind of stink to it. It doesn't speak to me. I really don't like the score in this one all that much. I wish they had gone with the original score because it adds to the kind of ambiance of the movie. And this one detracts a little bit from that. Not a ton, but a tiny little bit. I also feel that it's a really big swing to make Michael related to Laurie. Like a huge swing. Like what was the thought process on that? I get what they're going for, and in a sense, I think it really works. The way that they do it works. But I just don't know that it's necessary, and that's such a big swing for something that's like, I mean, I guess, like, sure? I don't know. I think there's a reason that a lot of the sequels kind of chose to ignore that. Maybe almost all the sequels kind of chose to ignore that. I understand. I could see that. Honestly, it kind of makes sense to me. That said, in this movie, selectively, I think it still works. It's not a huge negative at all. Final thoughts on Halloween 2. I just love this movie. Like I said, I put these two movies in terms of enjoyment right next to each other. Halloween 1 is a better film in terms of just being a film, but they're both equally enjoyable for me. And honestly, it doesn't feel like Halloween until I've seen these at least once, probably a couple of times. For being the first in a retrospective series, honestly, these are probably the most boring ones to start with because I don't have a lot of negatives to say. I think these are both incredible films and I watch them every year. So what am I going to be like? No, it's dog shit. And again, not a super hot take, I don't think. Most people pretty much like these movies. They have the Halloween vibes. They feel dark and eerie and creepy and upsetting. They leave lingering questions and they just flow together so nicely that it becomes a really great double feature movie night. Thank you for watching this video and checking out my channel. I do have a whole series of these coming out from the rest of September into October. They will be culminating on Halloween, the 31st, with Halloween, Halloween Kills, and Halloween Ends, all in one video. That's gonna be a bitch to edit. Anyway, let me know what you think of Halloween 1 and Halloween 2. Do you watch them together? Do you watch them separate? Let me know in the comments below. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe, and like I said, comment down below. Oh, and hit the little bell I think you're supposed to hit. Anyway, or do none of that because I am not your dad. I just remember being like, oh, I'm cool now.